So I'm a board certified psychiatrist, and it's my mission to help PMHNPs learn and master psychiatry. And in this video, I'm going to be sharing with you a study system that you can use for PMHNP school. So for context, this is the study system that I developed that helped me get through medical school. So 4 years learning day by day, all the stuff that we had to learn about the body, studying 40, 50 plus hours a week, learning this, going through all the testing that we had to do. And so I think that you'll be able to get a lot out of this and apply it to your studies as well. And the reason that I developed this was because when I was an undergrad and I was studying, all I would do was listen to the lecture, I would write some notes, I would go over the notes, and then maybe a couple of days before the test, and then like leading up to the test, and then take the test and then do fine. But then when it got to med school, the volume of information that we had to learn was so much that system was not sustainable anymore. And so I had to develop a new system to be able to learn all the vast amounts of information. I tried doing that for the first test and absolutely got blasted. And I was like, okay, this just reading the notes is not going to work because we just had too many notes. And so in any kind of healthcare professional school, you'll have the same situation. So what I want to walk you through is my study system. So the first step is, so you have the lecture, right? You listen to the lecture, and what I did was I listened to it at 1.5x speed. And I also listened to it at home. So you have to find out what system works for you. So here, the speed, and then here, the location. I found that 1.5 to 1.75 was the sweet spot for me to really internalize the material and still be able to process it. And then the location. Some of my classmates, they loved showing up to the lecture at 8 a.m. or 9 a.m. because it helped them stay accountable. For me, I didn't like that. I preferred to sleep in and study on my own time, but that's how it was for me. So that I figured out that system. I prefer to be by myself without any distractions. So that's the first thing that you do with the lecture is, you listen to that. And then the notes that you're taking. So what I was doing personally was I was using OneNote, and with OneNote, so I'll actually write that as a second step. So OneNote. So I had the PowerPoint actually uploaded into OneNote. And then as I was listening to that lecture, I was taking notes. I was taking notes with my pen. So of course, you can take notes typing as well. That's one way. What I found was that I had my Microsoft Surface. So I had Microsoft OneNote pulled on. And so notes with pen on computer. So after the lecture's done, I have handwritten notes all over the PowerPoint using my Microsoft Surface pen. And so then I had those notes. And so then what I did was then I made OneNote summary notes. So now I've listened to this lecture. Okay. I've made notes on my PowerPoint on the actual thing. Then I would make summary notes of it. So the PowerPoint is obviously going to have a whole bunch of information, and some of it's going to be relevant, some of it's not going to be relevant. It's going to be spread over 50 pages or whatever, 100 slides. Now I want summary notes that are only like 1 page, 2 pages, 3 pages long. What summary notes really force you to do is they force you to distill the information. So distill, find important stuff. Because in a PowerPoint, professors aren't the most economical or efficient with their teaching. A lot of them ramble into other things that are not what you need to understand. So basically, you going through the summary notes, it's the process of you filtering through, okay, this is helpful, this is not, this is helpful, this is not. The reason that this process is helpful is because this process helps you learn too. It's not like imagine if you just got these notes from someone else, you wouldn't get as much out of it because you didn't go through the process yourself. It's like, if you're trying to, I've always said this, like if you want to go to the gym, like imagine if someone said, hey, you could have the body that you want in a snap. Would you do it? And I would actually say no, because it's the process of going through the gym, of going through the workouts, of prioritizing your sleep and diet and things. And like all those give you such good skills that you can transfer to other areas, and you feel like you earned your body versus if you just kind of just given it. So it's the same kind of concept here, where like the process of you going through this, of you struggling through this, trudging, that's what will help you learn. But then, okay, so now you have those distilled notes. What do we do next? So the next thing that we do is we put those into Anki. So we put them into Anki. And when I was in undergrad, I used to think flashcards were the dumbest thing ever. And I remember specifically there was this girl who sat next to me in physics, and she had all these like beautifully highlighted notes and different color coordinations, and she would make all these pretty flashcards, whereas I would just like write the notes. And she would bomb the test and I would do great. And like that's when I realized, okay, like a lot of this is just excess BS work that doesn't need to be done. But then when it flash forward, when it came to med school, I started using flashcards because there's so much information that I was like, okay, I need to learn and use them. And so what you do now is you put these OneNote notes that you have into Anki. And so you make cues for, so if you're not familiar with it, Anki is a spaced repetition flashcard program. What this means is that when you do flashcards, sometimes you'll start coming across a point where, okay, some stuff you understand well and other stuff you don't understand well. But then if you repeat the whole deck again, it doesn't make sense to keep doing the questions you already understand. You want to focus your time and effort on doing the stuff that you don't understand. So what Anki does is basically the questions that you answer well, it will push those off way off into the future. And the questions that you struggle with, you do those more, like you'll get those repeated more. So that way you start really honing in on the questions and the topics that you don't really understand. And it uses this concept called spaced repetition, which is basically repeating information over time is how we learn. So the process of now you take the summary notes and you make the questions for yourself is what's going to help you to further learn and understand the information. One point for making the questions about yourself is that you want to make sure that they go both ways. They're inverted. What does this mean? So let's say, for example, I ask you, what is the antipsychotic associated with galactorrhea? You say risperidone. Okay, great. And then I could also ask it, okay, what side effect is risperidone most associated with? Galactorrhea. Oh, okay. So now you see I'm asking from both ways, because if you don't do that from both ways, what I found is that sometimes you'll remember the association one way, like, oh yeah, risperidone, galactorrhea, but you might not remember, oh yeah, galactorrhea equals risperidone. So that's where now you start making the questions for yourself. And then now, number 5 is that you have to do your daily reviews. So as anyone who's ever used Anki knows, like the bane of Anki's existence and using it is that the daily flashcard reviews stack up and you have to do them. So now let's say, imagine I did this lecture and I did all this process and I end up with like 50 flashcards. But now let's say I have 3 lectures to do. And then now let's say, right, and then we have 3 lectures to do multiple times a week. That's how it was in med school. So like 3 lectures on Monday, 3 lectures on Tuesday, maybe Wednesday we do a team-based learning, but on Thursday we have 3 more lectures. So now I've had 9 lectures for that week. And those flashcards start adding up. So pretty quickly I might have like 1,000 flashcards. And it wasn't uncommon to have a deck for like a test study that was like 5,000 flashcards. Or yeah. And so you have to do the daily reviews because that's what keeps you grounded and it keeps you on top of all your learning. So then you do the Anki, you do the daily reviews, and that's what keeps you on top of it. That's the most important thing. And then number 6 is practice questions. So this is something that I never did, unfortunately, in med school. And if I could go back, this is the number 1 thing that I would change, was that I would do practice questions for each test related to the topic. So for example, the way that it worked for us was that we would have all these different tests. Like let's say there's like a biochem test and there's like a cardiology test and then there's a physiology test, or then there's a nephrology test. We also had board questions that were associated with those practice questions. And what I wish I had done was done more of those board style practice questions, because then I would have been able to process the information in a more active scenario in a more patient guided kind of question. And then it would help me for board prep as well. And unfortunately, I never did this because if you see the whole process, the whole thing that we're trying to do here is we are trying to go from passive to active. We're trying to take our learning from passive learning all the way down to active learning, passive to active. So the lecture, listening to a lecture is very passive. But as we go down this funnel, now we're doing more and more active things. And so it's that active things like this Anki, this is called active recall. And this will really help you learn, internalize, and understand information much better than just listening to a lecture will. So this, and then I would just do this system, and then by the time the test came, I would be well prepared. Because then now what I'll write is the night before. I am someone, I don't believe in cramming. So I don't cram. So by following the system, what happens is that you've come to the night before and you've understood the information, you've internalized it. And what this did is it allowed me to fall asleep very relaxed, very comfortable. So that way I could just wake up and then go to the test without feeling that much stress. Whereas, for example, I had a roommate in med school, and he would pretty much just stay up the entire night just cramming and studying everything. And like he did well, don't get me wrong, like he did exceptionally well. But he was very, very stressed out the night before the exam. Like he would stay up the entire night, he would study, and then he would take the exam, and then he would crash for however long afterward. And I just personally didn't like that. I preferred to just sleep naturally, get a good night of sleep before the exam, so that way my brain is most rested and optimized to perform the next day. So when you follow this system, you don't have to cram. You can do some last minute review, like last minute factoids, but basically because you've been studying all throughout the weeks, you don't need to cram. And I found that that was the greatest benefit of this system. So if you follow this, this will get you through professional school, PMHNP school, or if you're listening to this, you're part of med school or whatever other healthcare professional school. This system is going to help you to learn all that vast degrees of information very quickly, and actually learn it for deeper too. I've seen variety of different study techniques. For example, I had a classmate, she was an art major in college. And so she would draw out these like beautiful diagrams, like on these like wide ass canvases about, whatever concept we were learning. That doesn't personally work for me, but like she was one of the top in the class and she did that. I had other classmates that would get together in groups a lot, and then they would do group studying where like they would study, go through the lecture stuff as a group, and then they would test and quiz each other all the time too. That worked for them. That's great. Wasn't really a thing for me. So point being is that you basically have to find your system that works for you. This is the one that works for me, and this is the one that I recommend, especially if you want to learn without cramming, without stressing, and you want to kind of be learning every day. So I hope this helps you during school. And if you really want to master psychiatry specifically in the real world, best way to do that is in our PMHNP Academy. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video.